Recording in progress. Recording.
Are we underway, Liz? Are we ready to go?
We are ready to go.
Thank you. Kia ora katoa. No mai haere mai. Welcome to this meeting of the Data and Information Committee. As you'll have read in the agenda, we've got a series of reports to work through, and all of which represent huge amounts of work and detail. I just first off want to thank staff for putting together another bunch of really high quality reports that are affording us a wealth of information, and that can hopefully inform our direction and provide the base knowledge and platform for our decision making in other committees. So just a reminder that this committee does not make decisions other than to receive reports. And as we work through all the information, it would be helpful to consider anything that might need to be referred elsewhere for further work or decision making. So we'll just get started. If I can find my notes, which would be really, really helpful about this meeting. They were on a screen right here before, and of course they have now disappeared forever. Here we go. Okay, so apologies, got no apologies. If anybody's got anything, let me know. No request to address public forum to address the committee. We do need to confirm the agenda, but I have got requests to reorder. And those requests are to swap item 7.1 for item, so that's the air report. Instead of being first, that will be last, and we'll put the transport report first. So, and that's to make it easier for staff that have to be in other places. So I'm hoping that's going to be okay for everyone. Everyone's okay? Can we do a thumbs up for that? Awesome.
Yep.
All right, is that good enough, Liz, or do you need it moved and seconded?
No, that's fine. You can reorder it. It's up to you, Chair.
Okay, so we've reordered it, so that's what will happen. So we'll come to, instead of air quality 7.1, we will have the transport report first as 7.1, and we will move the air report to 7.5, so we'll have that last. Apologies to anyone that is inconvenienced, but hopefully it's going to help out. So we'll go there, and what else? So that's confirmed the agenda. Conflict of interest. Members are reminded of the need to stand aside from decision making if a conflict arises. Unlike in this, it's just receiving information. So I don't think anybody has any conflicts, do they? And outstanding actions, so let's move on to that. Item 6, outstanding actions of Data and Information Committee resolutions. There's no overdue action items, and open ones are currently on track to be completed by due dates. Does anybody have any questions or anything about that? No? Okay, we will move on to item 7.1, and I believe Julian's going to come and present this one for us.
Councillor, can we do the minutes, please?
Oh, the minutes,
I'm happy to
sorry,
move the
thank
minutes.
you.
Thank you.
Kate will move minutes, seconder. Hillary, seconder, and Councillor Calvert. So that's Councillors Wilson and Calvert, thank you, Liz. So now we will move to the transport report. Yes, Anna Dunedin. Okay.
7.5.
We need to move those. We don't just need to have a mover and a seconder. We have
Okay. Oh, thank you. Okay. So all in favour of accepting the minutes? Aye. Thank you. Carried. So the public transport report, is that just Julian here, and or are you presenting that, Dr. Palmer? Oh, there's Julian. Lovely.
Yeah.
This is just to update the committee on the performance of its public transport and total mobility services for the last financial year and the first part of this financial year. Julian, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So the report
basically summarises patronage and revenue for the networks that we have, the customer satisfaction surveys that we recently finished, a little bit about real time, total mobility, and inquiries. If we move to the discussion section, starting off with public transport in Dunedin, the key figures are that although 2020-21 patronage for the last financial year is significantly higher than the previous financial year, the previous financial year was significantly affected by COVID-related travel restrictions. So we're comparing a full year of no restrictions to a year that had periods in time where we had fares not being charged, and also periods of time where we had severely restricted patronage due to lockdown regulations. The other thing to bear in mind is that we're still in the $2 fare trial period, so that could also be driving patronage. So we are significantly higher than the previous financial year by 23%, but just bearing in mind those figures. What is also in the report is a comparison to the last full pre-COVID financial year, which is 2018-2019. And if we do a comparison to that year, we are actually patronage has actually increased by 6%. However, again related to COVID, July and August of 2020, we weren't charging fares. So again, not necessarily a reasonable comparison or an accurate comparison. So if we strip July and August out and compare the periods September to June 2021 to September to June 2018-19, we are 1% above where we last were pre-COVID. So it does indicate a full recovery, slightly higher than where we were before all these COVID restrictions came into force. Are there any questions on that before I move to Queenstown?
Councillor Deaker has got his hand up, and then Councillor Wilson.
Thanks very much, Alexa. Julian, we 2.7 million trips is brilliant. We've never been as high as that, I don't think. But we still have this fare deficit, still running at a big loss every month. Yep. I wonder whether you've done any calculations as to what patronage would have to be for us to break even. How much, what percentage growth would we have to achieve in walk-on passengers to achieve closing that big revenue hole?
If we were to maintain the $2 fare?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I don't have figures to hand. I believe Gary has done some research on this, but it would be something like off the top of my head, but this is an estimate, something like a 25% increase in patronage, something along those lines, I believe. But I wouldn't quote me on that, because we'd need to actually have the figures in front of me.
Funnily enough, that was my guess. It would have to be about 25%. But yeah. Anyway, that's good to know. If Gary has done some more detailed work, it'd be good to hear that, because we are in a bit of a bind. We don't want to lift fares, but we can't keep on having this big fare loss every month, in my opinion. Anyway, thanks, Julian. Good numbers.
Yeah, I mean, the fare thing is interesting because if you live in, say, St Clair or St Kilda or somewhere like that, you might be not as an adult passenger would be looking, 30, 40 cents cheaper or something like that to get into town. But if you're in, say, Palmerston, a return trip could be previously as much as $23 and now it's $4. And so there's quite a disparity depending on how far away from the city centre you are.
the shore is. I agree.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Wilson next, and then Councillor Scott, and then Calvert. Thank you.
Thank you. There's some really good stuff in here, and it's really good to see the numbers increasing in Dunedin in part. What I don't get a measure for, and I would be really, I think we could all benefit from understanding, is what are the services that are running well, and what can we learn from why they are running well? So I presume, as has come out in the figures, that these services are not all well patronised either all day long, or there's some that aren't well patronised at all. And until we can get it down to that sort of layer of information, it's really hard to work out, be able to start analysing it. Do we have that data somewhere?
We do have it. So it's partly broken down to that level in the following pages of the report, where we've split the patronage and revenue by unit. So each unit, as part of the PTOM the framework, which each unit is made up of a group of routes, and in the report is sort of each unit, but we haven't gone down to each individual route level. We definitely can do. We're aware of the fact there are some services at the moment that are very popular. Some of them are actually even running duplicate buses, so 2 buses arrive at the same timing point at the same time. Others are less busy, but yeah. So there is variation between routes.
Yeah, I think it would be really helpful to understand that and the diurnal difference, because obviously, depending on some areas have a higher population of gold card users as well.
Yeah.
That will have a diurnal change. So some, these hard-working students who get to the library to get the best seat and don't leave till 11 will have a very different bus things than a gold card thing. So I'd be really interested if we can get down to that data maybe at the workshop.
Yep, definitely.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson. So next, Councillor Scott.
Oh, sorry, I was taking the wrong icon. So just following on from Councillor Deeker's comments and yours responses, Julian, you're basically saying that with the $2 fare, we'd have to increase patronage by 25%. Now, just following on from that, is it clear to us as a group, what are the levers that we need to pull to do that quantum of patronage increase? Now, I mean, you might say it's not possible, but for example, on page 168, it talks about customer feedback, and in July 21, there were 32 complaints about timeliness. As a group, if we were able to address the timeliness either through the app or signage or on-time mechanisms, or parking costs, working with the is it clear to us can we establish another strategy to do that patronage increase and keep the fares at $2?
So firstly, just that 25%, that's a guess.
Yeah.
So just to make that clear, or guesstimate. Look, there are a number of different levers that can be pulled. I don't know, I'm not sure that I can robustly say what they specifically are right now, but what I would say that, fare reductions don't necessarily drive people all onto the bus service. I mean, even if it was free, there are lots of other factors that come into it, like traffic, congestion, parking fees, all sorts of things. So there are a number of different levers. Some of them are ones that we're in control of, and some of them are ones that we're not in control of, is what I would say.
Yeah, well, I just hope as a group that we do get some clarity around that. So it's quite clear what our aims and objectives are to increase patronage. So maybe we can't control traffic, but yes, we can if we work with NZTA and the DCC. The parking fees, we're talking about liaison with the DCC. In terms of timeliness, that's completely in our camp.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I would be disappointed if we just throw our hands up and said, or it's too hard, I think we should go for it, build upon the good work that's already happened. Thank you.
Yep, I agree.
Brian, frequency is more important than timeliness. If we had 15-minute frequency all over the city, and Queenstown for that matter, that would probably lift patronage more than cheap fares would. But it would cost a lot more. So we're stuck in the same bind.
As you go down that discussion, when you're thinking about costs, you also need to think about opportunities and savings, climate change, and all those sorts of things. What it costs us is actually not that clear, really, at the moment. Councillor Calvert, you had some questions.
Thank you. Yes, it seems to me that from what we know, and this is a difficult lot of comparisons, so perhaps we can't even make them, but that we've got fairly much the same amount of patronage as we had before before we had $2 fares. We don't seem to have changed the patronage much with the super gold people who were going on the buses for free. There isn't a whole heap more of them going on the buses for free than there was going on the buses. So even charging nothing. And we don't appear to have, despite everybody saying that students would all get on the buses if they were free, we don't appear to have any evidence that students who would usually use the 2 legs they have hanging off them to walk around the place. Have we got any very useful information, or can we get any that would tell us what would actually increase things? You've said sort of there's levers and things, but to sort of say, well, if I'd frighten you onto a bus if I made the parking 5 times the amount or something is one thing, but what could we, firstly, do we actually know if it's not fares? And Councillor Deek has just said he thinks frequency might do it. So that's my first question. And the second question, sort of perhaps related, is if we have more buses, do we know how much in any way each bus trip uses in the way of whatever energy it uses? At the moment it's fossil fuels, but it will be electricity. But if we don't yet know, I gather, how many people is on each bus, but if you had, for example, 4 people on average on a bus, how much use of whatever fuel we were using would that be compared with 4 people in a car or whatever else, other alternatives? So it seems to me that you've got to compare the running of a bus. If you're thinking we're saving the planet, do we know how to get people onto buses if we've got a way? And secondly, do we know how much of a planet we don't save by putting an empty bus or a bus with, say, 2 people in it?
So in relation to your second question, you can equate the CO2 output from a typical single occupancy car versus passengers on a bus. And we know, I don't have the data in front of me, but we can work out a rough estimate on the average occupancy of buses, across a month. So if we're, for example, on average, our buses have across an entire month are at 25% occupancy, and however many people that is, you can equate it to the CO2 output from what is currently a diesel bus to what the equivalent would be for the same number of cars. And therefore,
sorry to interrupt, but I think Dr. Palm didn't find it easy to actually get that figure, or perhaps the figure we've got isn't just that I got a figure from Auckland saying they average 4 people on a bus. So we've got some figure for that, but it doesn't seem to me that it is likely that we're getting 25% usage of other people who have 4 people on a bus. So there's something odd going on.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Do we believe that the average occupancy for a bus is 25% full, 10 people on a bus if it takes 40 or however many it takes.
All right. Yeah, I was just saying notionally, if the average was 25 people, or if it was 5 people or 100 people, we could do a comparison between the CO2 output, the emissions on a bus versus the emissions on a car.
Okay, well, I'd be interested in that if you could.
Cool.
I think this is part of a wider discussion and a wider thing for us to look at in more detail as time goes on. Dr. Palmer, have you got something to contribute here?
I was going to say I can't find the part of the report we were discussing at the moment, and some of these questions are probably better handled at the workshop later this month.
I think that's true, and I think it's giving us some good. The discussion has given us some good ideas of where that workshop might go later this month. So maybe that can be taken on board. And in the meantime, if anyone's got any questions of this report, I see Councillor Malcolm's got his hand up, so we'll go there next. Councillor Malcolm.
Oh, yeah, look, that's really good. And just probably following on from what Councillor Deakin and Co was saying. So to me, it was pretty simple. You need another 600,000 people in a year to pay the fare. So, which is 1,300 people a day to take a round trip. And that balances out your 25% roughly. So when we do our workshop, it would be good to have it broken down to how many people that actually means, because 1,300 people in the size of Dunedin is actually not huge. And so even if I'm a bit out and it's 1,500, well, it's actually not a huge amount of people when you look at the scope of Dunedin. So there might be one small thing that actually gets that over the line. So I don't think it's impossible, but just I think if we break it down to the number of people to get that equation right would be a pretty useful thing to look at.
Thank you. And I think we have given some direction of where we want to go in the workshop, which is good. I wonder while you're there, Councillor Malcolm, if you'd like to move that we note the report.
Well, look, absolutely delighted to do that. And my apologies for not doing that and wasting your time for unmuting again.
Alexa,
and it looks like I've got a second in Councillor Hope. Go on.
no, wasn't Julian about to talk about Queenstown?
Oh, Julian, yeah, too. Sorry, leaping ahead. Aware of all these things to come in a 3-hour time frame.
But my utterances stays the same.
Thank you. Julian, is there any questions for Julian of Queenstown? Councillor Deakin.
It wasn't specifically Queenstown if you want to move on, but I do want to ask Julian about the satisfaction surveys.
Okay, go right ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, Julian, I think our numbers are very good. We're getting very high levels of satisfaction, very low rates of complaint per 100,000 passengers, if you like. And that's great, wonderful. But how do we compare with other regions? Do we have any across the country comparisons of how we're doing in terms of customer satisfaction with, say, Waikato, Bay of Plenty, Wellington, Christchurch, etc.?
Yeah, we have. Some of them publish these figures, in public on their websites and so on. Others don't, but we have. I don't have them to hand, but we are. So I don't have data to hand. So, but we can provide a comparison on what we can get our hands on for the workshop, if you'd like.
Yeah, let's see if we can look at that. That would be helpful, Julian.
Very good.
As we go think about the survey, I mean, one of the questions that pops into my mind is, are we asking the right questions? And then, Julian, you tell me that actually this is a standard Waka Kotahi survey, which means we should be able to benchmark against anywhere else in the country, shouldn't we?
Which is why I asked the question.
Yeah, so it's the same set of mandated questions every year. But the other thing that to bear in mind is that this is surveying people on the bus, so who are existing bus users. So which is a very important measure. But again, something we might want to think about for the future is, do we survey people who don't use the bus or off the bus and get some reasons for why they don't use the service?
Okay, before we go, has anybody got any other questions relating to this report? Great, so I've got Councillor Malcolm moving it, Councillor Hope seconding, is that correct? Oh, Councillor Hope, okay, and put the motion, all in favour?
All right.
Your thumbs up or whatever. That looks very good. Thank you much. And thank you, Julian. It's we're getting some really good data on this and it's very helpful. Thank you very much for that report.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on now to 7.2, which is the email report, isn't it? Environmental monitoring. And we've got Abby, is that correct?
Yep, good afternoon.
Hi, Abby. Hello. It's again a really high quality report, and the project really affords public better environmental engagement. So I was pretty happy to see some of that, and despite people are really finding value in Lawa, particularly females in Arrowtown. We saw females over 65 who live near Arrowtown. That was very interesting. So, what can you tell us about this report, Abby?
Really, it's just the purpose really was to provide some information about EMA, the Environmental Monitoring and Reporting Framework, and the LAWA project. It's something that the ORC hosts, especially in terms of the management and coordination of those projects. So it's just good to raise the awareness that this is another piece of work that's going on, that we can give credit to ORC for hosting. The EMA projects itself are regional sector significant projects with the overarching aim to make changes in how the sector delivers on its environmental monitoring and reporting functions. And I guess I just want to really highlight that it is quite a big collective, and it's great that the regional sector are working together with this along with some central government partners. It does involve a cast of over 100 people throughout the sector to provide and get environmental data and information up and onto LAWA itself. And so it's quite a big undertaking, but then the reach by doing this and ensuring that the reach and the value of the data goes further from what's been collected at the council level. So, for example, there's millions of data points there on the website if you go looking. And I guess it's a good idea or a good reflection to think about the fact that every single data point was collected by somebody in the field at some stage and processed in a lab somewhere. So it's a huge collective volume of effort and resources goes into collecting the data and then making sure it's available for others to use.
Go on, sorry.
Sorry, I was going to say, and the LAWA website itself is it's increasingly been recognised, as you say, as a source of high quality data and information. And both in New Zealand and internationally, actually, we get quite a few questions from international agencies around how we go about, running a project like this. And then currently we've got a range of topics from air quality, water quality across rivers, lakes, swim sites and groundwater, water quantity and land cover. So it's quite, it has quite a few topics on it, and the next up in the wings is looking at a topic on coastal estuaries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I should have introduced you, Abby, because I don't believe that we've seen you here before. For everybody that's listening or hasn't met Abby, Abby is ORC's National Project Manager of EMA LAWA. Her report's endorsed by Gwyneth, and it's an excellent report. Thank you. And I've got Councillor Hobbs, Councillor Malcolm and Councillor Scott in that order. Councillor Hobbs, any questions about this report?
Sweetheart, I was just actually, it's not particularly clear, but when you say something nice, I clap. That wasn't my hand up. On you go.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry about that. I mistook the yellow mark in the corner of your screen.
I was just clapping Abby on her first report.
It's an excellent report. I really, really did enjoy it. Councillor Scott, over to you.
Oh, I'm just trying to, get my head around this report. It's a while since I've read it, but what I do remember is that you're trying to get rid of the inconsistencies in the whole data process from collection right through to the communication. And you've mentioned LAWA. And from memory, when we've had discussion at our table about LAWA, there's been some concern about, did it rain on a particular day? Was it the rain that exacerbated the flow over the land into the stream and therefore the water quality? Are there any issues Abby, from your perspective, in terms of the communication side of things that you're aware of, that you're trying to do as part of this project as well? Or is it all good? Am I misinterpreting it? Like, any comment? A waffly question.
Okay, so for an example, with thinking about turning data into more information, so being able to say
good information.
Good information. So you might have a high E. coli level in your water.
Yeah.
After a rainfall event, and how do we make sense of that high reading? There's a couple of ways we can go about it, and one is to provide more context for when you might get a higher reading at a particular site, because council scientists will know sort of the overall performance of a site, for a swim site, for example, and what triggers those higher readings. And so I think that's really important for at a council level for the council comms and admins to be able to add that context into the site descriptions on Lawa, to be able to provide some idea around when you might want to choose to swim, and here's the latest results. In terms of being able to provide data to link rainfall to water quality, there is some work around, or we do have some capacity in that way for some regions where there is a link for some sites where you can see that the levels of the fecal indicator bacteria in the water are positively associated with the amount of rainfall, for example.
Yeah.
And where that can be sort of semi-modelled, Lawa has the ability to put a little alert, conditions may have changed thing to say that, be aware that it has been raining recently since the last water quality test was done. And so you should, take care and think more about whether you want to go swimming or not. So there is that aspect. We are limited, I guess, in terms of how those data are stored as to how we can display it on Lawa, but it's definitely something I'm always mindful of, trying to get more and more value of the data and work out how Lawa can absorb that data to be able to provide more of that in the future.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you. So I love your words, how to get, as good a value as you can out of the data. Yeah. Sweet. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Malcolm.
Yeah, good. And this might be to either Mrs. Gardner or Ms. Elsom. Just on page 91, under financial considerations, it says that we actually have, it basically says the URMA portfolio has its own funding arrangement. So for us hosting it, is there actually no cost to us, or? So that's pretty good, because it's a pretty good project.
I think we, sorry, I think, we do in terms of Abby's time is paid for by all regional councils across the country. And so we make a contribution to that. But in terms of, I think we do provide an extra little bit of support just around things like IT and the sort of back end office, because it's all hosted by ORC.
So in terms of a rough breakdown of what councils provide, it's based on whether the council is considered small, medium or large. So ORC is considered across the councils as a medium-sized council, and the current contribution is 15k per year from Otago as direct funding towards the project to sustain the project office, which is myself and a bunch of contractors who manage and maintain the website and look after comms.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent concept, and thanks for that clarity. Thank you.
And anybody else got any questions about this report or anything to be further explained? In that case, can I have a mover and a seconder? Note the report. Councillor Wilson, Councillor Noon, thank you. So I'll put that motion. All in favour, please raise your hand. Anybody against? All good. Thank you. That's carried. Thank you very, very much, Abby. It's a really positive piece of work that is, I think, well appreciated, not just by us, but certainly by the public. And thank you for your presentation today. Okay, we're going to move on to 7.3, State of the Environment Monitoring Biannual Update. This paper reports on the data capture and quality produced from the Environmental Monitoring Network, which is operated by our environmental monitoring team, and it covers 1st of July to the 30th of June. And I believe we have Peter Stevenson presenting this today. And again, we are simply noting this report. Are you there, Peter?
Yes, I am. And
there you are.
yeah,
Hello.
yes,
Welcome.
yes, I am.
And thank you very much. It seems to tell us a lot that can inform our work around water, despite some of the identified issues. It's over to you. Thank you.
Yes, and I guess it follows on from what Abby's report was highlighting about the data and the display of that data through LAWA. So basically, this report is it summarises where this data has come from. It's basically an internal report the environmental monitoring team uses to assess its compliance to its performance targets and to sort of identify any areas of improvement. And so we actually run this report every quarter, and the findings of the report are discussed across the whole team at a full team meeting. And from that, we can try and critique our work program, focus on where we see areas for improvements or opportunities, and attend to some of the more problematic sites that may be giving us problems with our data quality. It also is used to just make sure that we are running our quality assurance processes in a timely manner, and that we're making the data available to our internal projects that are used mainly for science or for natural hazards, sort of in a timely manner, making sure we're meeting their timelines. And also we're making sure that the data that's going out to the public through the data requests or through our Water Info website, we're also making sure that we're working within good time frames and making sure the data is available to all the the external stakeholders that may want to use it. So yeah, so it's a fairly technical report, I guess, in terms of compliance to NEMS and all those sort of acronyms. So yeah, that's basically a bit of a summary of it. So
thank you. Have you got any questions? Councillor Scott.
Yeah, I thank you very much for your work. And as I understand it, this is mainly about telemetered sites. And yeah, we got that right?
there is a small component of those sites reporting there are manually downloaded as well. So that estimate is probably an 80% of the network, the SOE network, and the project sites that we collect data for are telemetered. So
yeah. So you're getting fresh water temperature, you're getting fresh water oxygen. How useful is that? Like it's going to help to a certain degree about the well-being of the waterway, but like I'd love to see E. coli in there or nitrogen in there or something like this. And when's that going to happen?
The sensors for E. coli really haven't been developed, so we're really waiting on technology to catch up with a lot of that work. We do have a small number of nitrate sensors. They're not included in the report, but we have, I think, 3 sites that are delivering continuous nitrate levels, and we do have some turbidity sites, 1 or 2 small number of turbidity sites and conductivity. So we are doing some work in that area, but some of the more common parameters that I guess we'd like to see, such as E. coli, are very difficult to have a sensor to actually measure that. So we're still very reliant on people going out, taking a water sample, and for that water sample to then be sent to a lab to be analysed and then reported on. So yeah, it's just unfortunate technology hasn't quite caught up with that sort of information yet in some of those areas.
Okay, well, the nitrogen, are we 3 nitrogen meters? How many at-risk nitrogen sites are there around our region?
Look, that's probably a little bit outside the scope of my knowledge and the report. It's sort of, we're basically the information providers to our science team, and they really drive a lot of the work we're doing. So it's probably something I wouldn't really want to comment on. The network's really driven by the needs of our science team. So
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Scott and Pete. Anybody else got any questions about this report? Well, we'll leave it there. I need a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Calvert, Councillor Hope, lovely. And yeah, it's really, I suppose it's really important information to gather as we work towards our land and water plan too, but it's a good report. Thank you very, very much for that. And I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Anybody against? No, that's carried. Thank you very much, Pete. That report, by the way, was presented by Aika, who is actually not here today. She's had to race off somewhere. I can't remember where, somewhere. That brings us to 7.4, which is the Lake Spy report. Fascinating for me, living by a large lake that is slowly degrading. This paper reports on the ecological conditions of 6 lakes in the Otago region. They are Hawea, Katipu, Wanaka, Hayes, Dunstan and Onslow, and it uses the lake submerged plant indicator. It's been developed by NIWA. Report authored by Hugo Borges and endorsed by Gwyneth. It's a noting report as well. And have we got anybody talking to this or answering the questions, Gwyneth?
Yes, Hugo, but I just can't find him on the screen.
No,
Hugo,
I can't. I think he's here.
He was on a minute ago. He appears to have lost connectivity.
Okay.
Do you want to skip ahead?
Can I just ask a question of introduction then? Yeah. So Alexa made a comment about a degrading lake, and I actually thought this made Wakatipu sounded quite good, and I just was wanting to check if I missed something.
I wouldn't mind discussing that a little bit. It is slowly degrading. If you, I can find the page actually. Okay, Wanaka and Wakatipu are both slowly degrading, and the measurements of this report worry me slightly because it looks like, and I'd like to ask somebody about this, it looks like you actually have to degrade to fall into a lower band before any action would actually be taken. And I don't know that may suit things nationally, but I'm not sure if it necessarily well suits our lakes, which are in far better condition than national standards might have anything to do with. Anyway, so that's where I've got that from. It is in there. It says that that Wakatipu and Wanaka are degrading, but only slightly. I don't think only slightly. It's not quite good enough for me. But anyway, there we go. I'll go to Councillor Laws and then Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you. I'm reading in the executive summaries that 3 Otago lakes are found to be in excellent condition: Hawea, Wakatipu and Wanaka. But then I note later on in the report that Hayes and Dunstan, which is table 12, I think, no, it's table 1 on paragraph 16 of the report, it notes that Dunstan and Hayes are in a very similar condition. They're both classified in the 2020 band for invasive plants as a C. Their overall condition is moderate, not high, not excellent, but moderate. And I was aware of the fact that we had voted $200,000 this financial year towards a lake management strategy. And I was wondering if we could recommend that this report, Madam Chair, be directed to policy for consideration or further consideration, because we do have money in our long-term plan. In fact, it's in our annual plan. It's $200,000, I know, because I was promoting it. And it would be nice to utilise that money in association with LINZ, who, remember, made a presentation to us, who are looking to partner with us in this current financial year. So would it be possible, please, to refer this paper for further action to policy and strategy, please?
I think that's a very, very sound idea. I have some concerns. Gwyneth has something to say probably about that.
Yeah, I was just going to say we are currently scoping up what a strategic plan for lakes would be. We were planning to come back to you before the end of the year about that scope and how we were proposed to spend that $200,000 over 2 years, I believe it was. If you want to...
I think it's $200,000 a year. I had a bit of an argument with that, Gwyneth. I'm pretty sure it's in at $200,000
I can go back and check the resolution, that's fine. I guess this report is one of, I guess, a whole swathe of information that could contribute to a strategic lakes plan. And so I guess what I would counsel is perhaps we continue to talk to stakeholders to shape up that plan. This being one input of information about what that plan might tackle. This information goes to the policy team wasn't sort of delegated to do that. So if you just get staff to do it, that'd be great, and I can direct it to the right people among staff. The policy team obviously this information will be captured as part of the land and water plan in terms of any policy response that way as well.
We will have to, Hugo's here now, good. We will have to refer to a committee of some sort, Gwyneth, because we can't make any decisions here. So should that committee be policy or should it be something else?
Committee, but we were planning to come back. I think we had scheduled it for the November strategy and planning meeting to come back to around that lakes plan anyway, so we can address it.
Shall we formalise that with a motion? Would that be a good idea, Councillor Laws?
Thank you. I would appreciate doing that and would so move.
Okay.
That this report be referred to staff for the purpose of a paper to be presented to policy and strategy around lake management.
I think, it won't hurt to do that. If they're doing it anyway, that's all good. Have you got a note of that, Liz? I'm not sure how I bring that in.
I'm going to add a number 2 to this resolution, refers this paper to the Strategy and Planning Committee for further study around lake management. Is that?
Well, no, it's we're referring this paper to staff, to policy staff. I think that's right term, Gwyneth, for referring this matter to policy staff for later presentation or for their report to the policy and strategy committee.
Yeah, for consideration as part of the strategic lakes. I can't remember the resolution exactly said, the lake strategic plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. I wonder if we might just now pop to Hugo and see if he's got any intel on this report that he might want to explain or to bring anything to our attention. Welcome, Hugo.
Hi, thank you. I'm sorry I had some technology problems, like
no worries.
Shut down and it was not opening. So the purpose of this report was mainly to do a baseline study on Lake Spy, which is a new requirement from the NPSFM now, 2020. So we've selected, the aim is to apply the Lake Spy in all state of the environment lakes that we monitor at the moment. So we initially started with Lake Hawea, Wakatipu, Wanaka, Hayes, Dunstan, and Onslow. And this next year, we're going to be doing the coastal lakes, Tuaktoto, Waihola, and Tomahawk Lagoon. So as I said, this is a baseline study. So there were some surveys that were done back in the days in Wakatipu and Wanaka, but that's the first time that Otago Regional Council contracted NIWA to do these Lake Spy assessment. Overall, the results that we've got from the lakes were good and expected. We did observe some declining in some of their lakes, but within the excellent band. And I've heard one of you mentioned about these, that they were concerned about how we're going to be acting with those declines within the bands and how we're going to approach these. So yeah, and some of the other lakes that never had any study, so that's the first time that we've done it, like Onslow, Dunstan, and Hayes. So yeah, and then according to the trophic level of those lakes, the results that we've got with the lake SPY, it's what we were expecting, because there are some deteriorating systems, and then we were kind of expected that they would be in lower bands. Yeah, so if you have any questions about the results that we've got, I'm happy to discuss here and clarify anything.
Thank you, Hugo. I've got Councillor Hobbs and Councillor Calvert. And Councillor Laws, is your hand still up for something else? Oh,
No, I'm sorry.
that's right, no problem at all. So Hobbs, Calvert, thank you.
Thank you. It's to do with the deeper lakes, Wakatipu and Wanaka.
Yes.
And you talk in paragraph 18 about a thing called bryophyte.
Yes.
And it grows, as I understand it, lower down.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives us some indication of the health of the lake. Am I hitting along the right lines, Hugo?
Not necessarily. This comment was brought up because there was like a survey in the 1982 that they found those bryophyte, but because they actually had divers diving up to 60 meters depth, and then these would they are native species, and they would enhance the biodiversity that we have in the lake. And then because they were not found up to 20 meters depth, you have raised a concern that we should maybe investigate to see if they're still there.
Okay, I would love to see us investigate it further, but it actually, you have answered and sort of soothed my mind, because I thought the bryophyte might have been a troublesome or giving troublesome signs.
No, it's actually good. They found bryophytes. Bryophytes is a group of plants, and there are many species. So those species that they grow like at very deep sites, they are very rare around the world, actually. So that's why they have the relevance, So it would be nice to know if they're still there, they're still present in our lakes, and then make sure that we are protecting somehow, because what would actually impact them is water clarity. And because, we can clearly see in this report that water clarity degraded in most lakes. And this is due to algal growth, like we have now lake snow growing in Wanaka and Wakatipu. So all those things, they are factors, that would affect the submerged plants. So yeah.
Last question, Madam Chair. If you were to go lower than that initial 20 meters, would that give you, would there be any indications that you might find at lower depths that would inform you about health or not health of the lakes? I'm just worried about us only being on the top 20 meters.
Yeah, no, I think when they've chosen the methodology of using 20 meters, it's to become practicable, but also a well-informed decision, based on all the data that they've been doing. Okay. And so that's like the ideal sort of depth that you would record the changes and make sure that you have the outcome that you need. But of course, like when we know that there are species that are rare growing in deeper areas of the lake, it would be important maybe just have like adjustments depending on the lake, and then from now on start monitoring those deeper areas as well.
Thank you, Hugo, for the support. Thank you, Chair.
A Loch Ness monster.
Councillor Calvert.
Just a query, I probably should know the answer to this, but is this lakes, plural management, or lake management? And if it's lake, singular, which lake?
No, it's lakes.
Lakes.
I thought that was, but I was just wondering whether I was going a bit deaf or whether it was lakes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Callagher.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. I maybe have missed it in the report, but Why the inclusion of Lake Onslow?
So Lake Onslow is one of our state of the environmental sites, and we've been monitoring for quite a lot of time now. And according to the NPSFM, we have to monitor lake spy in our SOE sites. So although Lake Onslow is probably going to go through some changes now with the hydropower scheme, but it's one of our sites, and then hence the relevance of monitoring the site.
Okay, thanks. So just in some of the results, it looked like it was a relatively new one. The other question then is why the omission of Lake Roxburgh?
So what we do, because those analyses, they are very expensive, like because they use divers and like to do in all the lakes that we have in the region would be a lot of money to do it. So we selected initially only the state of the environment sites that we monitor as part of our network. So we currently don't monitor lakes Roxburgh, and that's why it was not included. But like in the future, depending on how it's going to be, because right now the only provider for lake spy is NIWA, and we've had a lot of time constraints to actually get, because I initially planned to do all the SOE sites, all the SOE lakes that we monitor, and we couldn't find time because they pretty much do for the whole country. So it was very hard to start with, and then it's very expensive. But I think now that's a new requirement in the NPSFM, we're going to have more companies available in doing these kind of jobs. So we hope that in the future will be cheaper, and then we can do in more lakes in the region. Yeah.
Thank you. Just one final question was that if the data that we're gathering, especially for Lake Onslow, was of advantage for the pending project that's being investigated there, would there be any recourse for some funding from central government with that?
Yeah, so what happened recently was that they reached out to us because they knew that we were doing this lake spy in Lake Onslow. So they were actually benefiting from the results that we've had. Yeah, so far there was no, I don't think they have it's not of their interest to be monitoring, because they have to do this 2-year project right now, to assess the health of the lake and how the lake would be impacted. So the lake spy tool is more like a long-term tool where you're going to see changes throughout the years, and as it is in the report, we're going to monitor every 3 years the lakes that we started monitoring now. So every 3 years, we're going to go back and look at the communities again, and then compare. So in the long term, I don't know how it's going to be looking for Lake Onslow. So I don't know exactly, how the central government would be thinking of it, because like if we go ahead with the hydropower scheme, it's going to be a completely different lake, so all the submerged plants is going to be pretty much completely changed for a while, and until we get them to stabilize again and start growing again. So it's going to be a completely different system in the future if it goes ahead.
True. I think also there could be some quite sizable impacts on Lake Roxburgh as well, depending on the direction of tunnels and flows as well. So, okay, thank you.
No worries.
Thank you. Has anybody else got any questions for Hugo? One thing I wondered, Hugo, and it's kind of carrying on from where Councillor Kelleher was, and there's been some other studies of some of the other lakes, Moke Lake and Diamond Lake up this area, and you're adding Waihola and other lakes from further down the catchments.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, is the plan to sort of add lakes each year, have more and more, and maybe go back to some of those ones that were done originally?
Yeah, so I think now, because we had never done it before the lake spy, so I think it was just a kickstart. Like my plan is definitely like to increase the knowledge as much as we can in the lakes that we have in the region. So I hope that in the future we're going to have the budget and the availability of the providers to do this work. So I believe that we should be doing like sets of lakes every 5 years. So we start creating that baseline so we know what's in there and how we're gonna keep track of them. Yeah, so that's the plan.
Great, thank you. And the other thing that does concern me, but hopefully we'll deal with that when it comes up to policy and planning, and that is that the national standards that put Dunstan and Hayes in a moderate category and Wakatipu and Wānaka in a excellent category are probably standards that are lower than what we would set, people that live in this region would set. And that is often the case, of course, with national instruments because they're blunt. But, so we may want to be your clever brain onto how we do something about that at some point.
Yeah, that's something we've been discussing, and my message is we should look like Hayes catchment as because like it falls under the Dunstan FMU, and then it's just like look at that catchment with a different approach from what we're going to do with the rest of the FMU. Definitely, yeah.
Okay, awesome. That's great. Thank you very much. I think you know where we're all coming from. Have I got a mover and a seconder, please, to receive this report? Councillor Wilson and Councillor Hope, thank you very much. Brian, you're just too slow with that hand.
Sorry, the motion, Madam Chair, the motion that was to do, is that going to be part of to remove and...
Could you read it out for us, please, Liz? We've got the one that we've got on our papers, but we also have a second part to it now, which is...
Yes, ma'am. So I have added number 2, and I've tweaked it again. Refers this report to policy staff for consideration as part of the Lake Strategic Plan before their report to the 10 November Strategy and Planning Committee.
Excellent.
You happy with that?
Excellent, thank you.
Can we just
actually you should
remove the word policy? Sorry, Alexa. Just remove the word policy. It's not policy staff working on it.
Okay.
All right, just staff in general.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, so we have mover and seconder. Are they both happy with that change? Perfect. Put the motion all in favour, hands up, please. Awesome. That looks like it's unanimous. Anybody against? No one. Lovely. And Hugo, thank you very much for that. It was a marvellous report.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Good. We've got next, we come to, actually it's our last item, which is wonderful. We've got through very well, people. Air quality, 2010-2019 State of the Environment Report, which this report gives us the trends and the state of air quality in the Otago region for the 10-year period, 2010-2019, as part of our obligations under the RMA. And the 10-year SOE next one won't be written until 2026, air quality report, so it's quite important. Report author is Sarah Harrison. The paper is endorsed by Gwyneth. So Sarah is an air quality scientist and is here, I believe. Sarah, there you are. Thank you. Thank you for an excellent, if slightly worrying report in some cases, but obviously there's some improvements as well. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. So this report is an analysis of the state and trends for PM10 for the 10-year period of 2010 to 2019. There were 8 airsheds that were monitored over this time period, which were Alexandra, Arrowtown, Balclutha, Central Dunedin, Clyde, Cromwell, Milton and Mosgiel, and the pollutant monitored was PM10. So for the state, we compared the data to the National Environmental Standards and other guidelines. We record several exceedances per year in 7 out of the 8 sites. For the trends, we analysed spatial and temporal trends, both short and long term. The spatial and short term trends help describe the differences between our different airsheds as well as within the airsheds. And the long-term trends show statistically significant improvements in most of our airsheds, which is one of the main differences between this report and the previous SOE report, where the trends weren't as significant or there just wasn't the same amount or enough data. Also discussed other main influences on PM10, such as weather, climate, and types of amounts of emissions, for which we also had new information. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. And we've got Councillor Hope, then Councillor Laws, then Councillor Wilson. Over to you, Councillor Hope.
Thank you. For a lot of places, this is a great read, but for especially Balclutha, it's a dreadful read. I was quite appalled actually to read how the air quality is diminishing badly. And I wanted to ask you a similarity, please, Sarah Harrison, which is this. What is the difference, say, between Balclutha and the central of Dunedin? You know, why are they so different? What is it? You know, I was trying to figure it out for myself, and I thought, no, I really would like some help on it, please. Can you just give us an overall analysis of why they're so different? I don't know what it was. I was thinking, is it because Balclutha is in a bit of a hollow? You've got the river there, and then you compare it to central Dunedin. Again, there's not a lot of industrial left in central Dunedin. You've got a lot of scarpies and things, but can you give me a comparison of perhaps apples and pears as to why Balclutha has diminished so bad, and what can we do about it? That's the big burning question, please.
Yeah, I think the main difference between Balclutha and central Dunedin is the emission sources. So central Dunedin, it does still have some industry, but it also is right next to the coast. It will have a lot of more natural sources than any of the other sites. So central Dunedin is probably the odd one out of all of our sites in that regard. And there will still be some home heating emissions that may come down from sort of North Dunedin areas and central Dunedin as well. But I would say Balclutha would be primarily home heating emissions. And yeah, I think I actually don't know as much about Balclutha as I do the other sites because we stopped monitoring it a few years ago. But yeah, from what I gather, it is like an area of sort of convergence where pollutants will accumulate once they're emitted.
All right, Councillor Hope.
No, that she just the last question, which is probably the most pertinent, which is how can we do and what can we do about it? I see right at the end of our report, we talk about comms being strong in Central Otago, but we also need to have that comms strong in South Otago as well. That's missing. I mean, how many people in Balclutha do you think know that their air quality is not flash?
Well, Balclutha isn't one of our Air Zone 1 towns. So all of the towns in Central Otago, they're the ones where we have focused all of our main efforts for improving. And I think in the past, it's come down to, do we need to look at the worst areas first? And once they're sorted, can we look at places like Balclutha and Mosgiel, which are supposedly supposed to be a little bit better already? So that might be the difference there.
All right, I'll ponder your answer. Thank you. And if I need to ask you anything further, I'll do that later. Appreciate that.
It might be something you might want to refer on to another committee at some point, Carmen. Councillor Laws, then Councillor Wilson, then Councillor Deaker, then Scott, then Hobbs.
I've got two questions. The first question, can I take you to tables 1 and 2, paragraphs 10 and 11 of the report, please? Now you'll see that the top table, that's table 1, is the number of exceedances presumably per year. And if I was to take you to, let's just say Cromwell, but I could take you to Clyde, I could take you to Milton as well, but let's just follow Cromwell through. In 2010, 43 days exceeded. Go forward to 2019, 13 days, 43 to 13. If I look at Clyde, 40 to 4. If I look at Milton, 46 to 20. Then go down to table 2, winter trend analysis results summary. Look again at Cromwell, 2010 to 2019 for exactly the period, says improving. Annual change 1.3, total change minus 13%. I assume that's exceedances. But wait on. 43 to 13 for Cromwell, for example, is not 13%. It's it's less than a third of the in 2019 total of 2010. And I could run that through for some of those others as well. Can you explain the discrepancy for me, please?
Yes. So firstly, the number of exceedances varies year to year anyway. You'll see in Cromwell there was 14 in 2017, which is quite a lot more than 2018, 2019. And every year can tend to be a little bit different in terms of the weather patterns that influence whether or not we'll have conditions appropriate for like an inversion layer, which will cause all these exceedances. So what the long-term trends have done is they've taken the seasonal variation out of this and sort of just analysed what it would be if there were no seasons. And they work best on trends that are either increasing or decreasing. They don't work very well on trends that maybe go down and then go up or are sort of flat. So that's how I would just explain that discrepancy. So Cromwell's trend isn't super great when you look at the trend analysis. So that it's basically the difference between why we can't just look at exceedance numbers for explaining our trends and whether our air quality is improving or not.
Okay, but you can't, I mean, so that's fair enough. I understand what you've done. So that explains that, thank you. But given that the climate is changing, and can I just tell you anecdotally, it would appear that there's a lot more wind in central Otago than there used to be. And certainly that's the evidence of anybody I talk to who's long-term residents. Might not that be reasonable to surmise that the last 2 years are indicative of the future, not of the past?
I'm not a climate scientist, so I wouldn't want to say what we're going to be seeing in the future. We could have a really bad winter next year and end up with 40 more exceedances, for instance.
But equally, you could have what you had for the last 2 years, and you almost haven't really got a problem. If you look at 2018 and 2019, you'd have to say, wow, the climate's solving a problem as it solves Dunedin's.
Well, we could have said that in 2015, potentially. But the thing is,
I think the key point here, Michael, Laws, is that 2 dot points don't make a trend. So we can't just pick 2 years and make a trend out of it.
No, but you can reasonably, I mean, if you're going to use climate change and factor that into your future policy, I'm just making the point that, it'd be interesting to see what 2020, well, actually, I know what 2020's winter was and 2020-21. And so I know I've lived through those last 2 winters of 20 and 21, and they'll be very similar to 18 and 19, not to before. So you can say it's not 2 years, it's 4 years, and that data must be very close to being available. Second question. When you measure the the exceedance, so you say, right, it's over, and we put that into the day where that day is exceeded. When you, and I looked through the report and it wasn't immediately clear to me, is it the average of 24 hours and you go, right, that's the peak, or is it the peak time that you are measuring that gets you over the exceedance? Can I give you an example? At 11 p.m. in Cromwell, it'll be very smoky. But at 8 a.m. in the morning, it won't be. Do we measure from 11 p.m. to 11 p.m., or do we actually take the measurement at 11 p.m., the peak, and say that is the number that puts it over into exceedance?
It's a 24-hour average, so it's measured from midnight to midnight. So it's just the average of the whole 24 hours, basically. The hourly data and any other kind of time period that you're measuring on that's shorter than 24 hours, the readings will be higher than that.
So you're saying that there'll be figures that are worse than this, in other data, for example, NIWA data?
Oh, no. And for example, say the hourly measurements can get up to, say, I don't know, 200 in Arrowtown in the evening, for instance, but our 24-hour recording will only be something like 60.
Okay.
As an example. Yeah.
All right. No, thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you for that. My question was also about Balclutha, and it occurs to me that we've concentrated, and I think this is what you said, Sarah, we've concentrated our work in the airshed one areas in Central Otago, which I can understand, but Balclutha is probably a poorer community and less likely to have the intensive redevelopment that some places in Central Otago have had. And I wonder if that is one of the issues, potentially, not only that, but also the supply of co-tanker coal, which may be an issue. And is it possible that it's just that the building renovations won't keep in a poorer area up with the development that may happen elsewhere?
I'm not too sure, but I do know that we thought the same thing about Milton, and that's why we included Milton in with the Air Zone 1 towns.
Yeah.
I don't know when that was done, but I think back when all the airsheds were classified, a lot of the assumptions were made on the fact that like Balclutha, Dunedin, Milton were kind of all coastal, so they were less likely to have temperature inversions and things like that, and possibly be less cold. So that's why it's been classified the way it has. As to the communities in these areas, that's not an analysis I've really done. But it would be good to acknowledge the way we try to approach the strategy implementation is to take each community the way it is and to work out what their issues are individually.
Yeah,
I think would be the best way going forward.
Councillor Tika.
Yeah, thanks, Alexa. My question actually has just about been answered because it was very similar to what Michael Laws was discussing with Sarah. But my reading of this report, Sarah, led me to believe that the measurable decrease in the number of exceedances in this report period seems to coincide with the warming figures that have come out and were actually publicised today about New Zealand's winters. I see that most recent winter had an average temperature of 9.6 degrees Celsius. Whereas it used to be around about, well, I think about 8.8. And I wonder whether you have any data or observations about the relationship between the warming climate and the air quality data. It's just as broad as that. I wasn't going to get specific the way that Michael did because I haven't got the local knowledge he's got. But is there a relationship between the changes we're seeing in our climate and the exceedances that you're measuring?
I haven't seen one, but I haven't spent a lot of time looking into it. What I did do was run a similar trend analysis on some of our temperature data, but it didn't come up with anything. It had no trend at all, because I was also a bit worried about 2018, 2019 being quite warm and maybe affecting the trends that way. However, our sites are not climate sites, they're air quality sites. So going forward, I could potentially run an analysis on actual NIWA station data and have a look at that. And I think that would probably be quite a good idea. But that might be more of a long-term future issue, for climate and those considerations.
Yeah, thanks. That would be interesting, Sarah. I'm not suggesting for a moment that we need to back off from our effort to the air quality. I know we have temporarily, but I'm looking forward to the resurgence of our work because, I look at the stuff you put in your report, which is excellent, by the way, and I see a strong correlation between air quality and coal use as well, and why we're still enabling people to burn coal, God only knows. So there are other things we've got to do and not rely on the climate to warm up and make it all irrelevant, because it's not going to do that. Anyway, thanks, Sarah. That's very good.
Thanks, Councillor Deaker. We've now got Councillor Scott, then Councillor Hobbs, then Councillor Malcolm.
Yeah, cool. I've got a question, but I'd just like to make a number of points before I get to my question. The first one is in relation to Balclutha. Councillor Hope was talking about Balclutha. I mean, historically, Balclutha, to a certain degree, was left alone because it was sort of deemed to be not too bad, and the southerly wind would come through and address any issues. And on their number of exceedances, like if you compare Balclutha, like it's something like a quarter of what Milton is, for example. And before we point the finger at Balclutha, you've got to be aware when you look at the exceedances that Milton is worse than Balclutha, Cromwell is worse than Balclutha, Clyde is worse than Balclutha, Arrowtown's worse than Balclutha, Alexandra, they're all worse. But the issue with Balclutha is that, as what this data shows, is that in 2015, 2016 and 2017, the numbers have gone up, and the following year it went down. So my thoughts are that, yeah, we need to stop forgetting about Balclutha and maybe just review the strategy there. So I make that point. The second point is, following on from Councillor Laws's comments, just to reaffirm, I think the point where Councillor Laws got to, that the Table 1 in terms of number of exceedances and Table 2 in relation to winter trends are two completely different dynamics. Exceedance is a blunt instrument. Do you go above a particular line? Whereas a trend is determining what actually is the trend. So comparing their percentages is a nonsense. The third point, Councillor Laws said that the weather changed in Dunedin, in central Dunedin, and that's why there was an improvement. What actually happened in Dunedin was that there was a concerted focus on industrial consents and, to a lesser degree, home heating. And particularly through the industrial consents, the stats improved. It wasn't magic, the weather instantly improved or whatever like that. And I make a final point before my question, is that overall what it's basically saying is that, excluding Balclutha, that all the sites have improved over this time period. So we have been chipping away in terms of our cosy homes, in terms of our promotions, in terms of different things that we're doing. And as Councillor Deaker says, we need to do more, coal and things like this. So my question I suspect to Sarah really is what we've decided as a council is to focus on water. For the next 2 years, I think we're principally doing monitoring. And then in 2024-25, I think we're doing a review of the air plan. And then the expenditure every year in our LTP actually, it doubles basically every year. It goes from up to 1.6 up to 3 point something, and then up to about $6 million where we really get into it. My question to Sarah is there anything that we can be doing now that has minimal expenditure to complement the monitoring that puts us in a better place for in 2 years' time? It might be relationships building, or working with the university. It might be whatever it is, putting your thinking cap on.
Yeah, I think staying involved with
there's two Sarahs. Sorry, I actually meant the Sarah CE, but Sarah Harrison, okay. You might want to say your point too.
And Gwyneth is going to jump in here too. So if somebody starts among the three of you.
I was just going to say, I think, Brian, the dates, we start our review of the air plan and air strategy next financial year. Looking to notify the air plan, I think it was 2025. So we're not holding we start those review processes next year. It's this year that there's the holding pattern. We just pushed it out 1 year in the LTP. I would also say Sarah is busily working away. She's brought, I think, I can't remember which committee meeting it was, but she brought a previous paper to you where she talked about a number of projects she was doing ahead of the air plan. So this time is being used to gather information to inform that air plan. This is one important input, which is the SOE report, but Sarah might want to talk to some of the other things she's doing, such as the sort of the temporary network of sensors she's got going to understand whether or not the current airsheds are the right airsheds and those sorts of things. So we are doing things. I guess the only other comment I heard that's not sort of science data related activity, we do still do comms in winter. Potentially there's more we could do around comms. It's some types of comms are relatively cost effective. And so that's one area that maybe we could push.
Cool. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you. 2 questions. The first is that I understand there is going to be a proposed new national environment standard on air quality, and the measurement will shift from a PM10 to a PM2.5. I'm not quite sure of the timing of this. I understand the work is being done now. You may know that better than I do. But do I deduce that our seemingly improving rates won't be seen as quite as improving when we start measuring PM2.5? And what is it that we capture in the difference between PM10 and PM2.5? Sorry, Sarah.
That's all good. Yes, you're correct. So the new standard for PM2.5, apparently the current deadline is the end of this year for it to be written. And at the moment, the proposed limit is half that of PM10. So where PM10, the limit is 50, PM2.5 will be 25. This is only really a problem for us because most of PM10 that we are measuring is emitted by home heating emissions, and incomplete combustion produces really small particles. So this is basically in the PM2.5 category. So in most of our towns, we will be seeing, like, I don't know, somewhere between 70 and 90% of our PM10 will be PM2.5. So we will see more exceedances.
Okay, thank you. The second question is just an observation about Balclutha. I've got 3 actually. It's an observation about Balclutha, and that is of course the predominance of Kaitangata coal. Having door knocked every house in Kaitangata in various elections, I do know that they burn a hell of a lot of coal in that area. The third thing I want to say is there are 2 things in here that you have said that you might do, and one is the work around Port Chalmers. I really appreciate that, because I'm sort of running a campaign that's nothing to do with the ORC, but is to do with the fact that ports got left out of air quality surveillance, and that has some real problems, particularly if we are to increase the amount of coastal cargo. And then you raised something about a rather strange thing that comes up with, and I've forgotten its blessed name, that comes up with climate change.
Black carbon.
Black carbon, thank you, love. Yeah. And I just want to say to all of us, I hope both those things are continued in your work plan. Thank you very much.
Sarah, did you have a comment on that? Sarah Harrison?
No, but they would be probably really good things to monitor. At this stage, I don't know when or how we will do these. But yeah, no, just definitely on the list of things to do.
Good.
Thank you. Councillor Malcolm, you've been really patient, and I hope you still can remember your question. And after, you'll have Councillor Kelleher. So go ahead, Kevin.
Oh, no, look, hey, really good discussion. And yeah, look, it is a really good report. And I will get on to North Otago as we go on, because everything else is in the rest of that mighty province, Otago. So I think just a couple of comments. I'll take my lead from Councillor Scott to do a couple of comments first, which I think is really important, is what I think we're really missing on this because the trend is going good, and what we're actually missing is what the government has actually been doing over the last number of years, and what we've been doing, working with cozy homes and the like, is actually insulating all these houses, and we've done a heck of a lot. And if you look at Milton, I know, working on the community trust, and the amount of cozy home applications that have come through from Milton, and in that lower decile areas where we've insulated all those houses. Well, of course, now even if they're burning Kaitangata coal, they'll actually be burning less of it. So that initiative actually might be starting to come through, and it'll be really interesting to see if we could get some data from that, and perhaps if we have 20 and 21 alongside that, that may also show that, because certainly the further we get down that government initiative to keep everyone in a warm home, we're certainly going to emit less emissions no matter what they're burning. So, but getting away from them would even be better. I just need to flip my computer. It was a question around the air sheds. 1221. That's my password, if anyone heard that. From
Access to your whole life in your banks?
Yeah. No. Jane's got those passwords and I'm not allowed them, so that's all right. Hey, concentrate. On page, it starts on page 26. So you've got 4 air sheds from 1 to 4, and you've grouped the 22 towns, and that's based on geography, climate, and air pollution potential. But is there any science behind that? Other than, and I don't mean that as a saying you're not doing your job. I'm just sort of saying it was that just purely an assessment we made without any true data behind it?
Do you mean the grouping of the air sheds or the air zones, or both?
The air sheds, yeah.
Well, the air sheds are all just based on urban areas, basically. And then I think they were grouped 1 to 4 because there's so many of them. We decided we couldn't possibly monitor them all, so we just monitor a representative from each of them. And so, yeah, they are grouped by kind of like geographical area and likelihood of exceeding, based on, there was a lot of monitoring data done in the sort of mid to late 90s, before the air plan was put together and before these were all gazetted. So that's what that's based on.
Okay, yeah. So if we go then to page 69, which has actually got the Health and Air Pollution of New Zealand exposure model that was developed, you'll see that, and we don't monitor it, and I wonder why, is the Waitaki is actually, when you have a look at the premature mortality in adults over 30 years, cardiac and hospital, respiratory admissions to hospital, and restricted activity days, the Waitaki probably is the poorest of the whole lot by a country mile. Well, not actually, by an urban mile, I should say, because it's based on the urban area. But yet we don't monitor it. And that's probably quite telling statistics that perhaps we should be looking at monitoring to see what really is happening there, because someone's monitoring to say that those, whether it be a model or not a model, it's quite scary.
Yeah. We, like Gwyneth was saying, we are conducting a monitoring experiment at the moment, which includes Oamaru. So yeah, it has been, I'm not too sure what the history is of these decision makings and why Oamaru hasn't really been monitored. I think there has been monitoring done in the past, and maybe that was the decision that sort of, we kind of relaxed about it. Maybe it wasn't, super high data. That's all I can really think when it comes to Oamaru.
That's cool. It just, like to me, I moved from Clinton to Oamaru. I'm an asthmatic, so I didn't need one in Clinton. And although we did burn a coal fire down there of good Kaitangata coal, we were told it was good at those stage. And then to Oamaru, I constantly had to use an asthma inhaler because of the inversion layer that sits over the town. In fact, you couldn't even walk. I'm out in the country now, so it's different. But it really would be, especially with that health statistics coming out. Great work you're doing anyway. Look, I'm not knocking that, but I think it might be worthwhile having. But also cozy homes has been really, really prevalent in in Oamaru with insulation and the like. So I just wonder if we could get some real stats on how many houses have been done by those cosy home and government initiatives to say, well, actually, we still want the dirty stuff stop being burnt, but actually this is having some effect everywhere.
Yep, Cozy Homes still have to, they've submitted their final report from our MOU working with us. So that will be presented to the council at some stage.
Good, thanks. And sorry, just a couple more. Look, this is actually quite really good reading. Hey, on page 53, you talk about other emissions, and one was is burning old paint, old painted wood, and the other one was arsenic from treated burning treated timber. Yet we haven't been using arsenic in timber since I think it was 83 or 84. We actually stopped using it. So the stuff that's being, unless people are wrecking a house and that would emit it, but it just hasn't been used since that period. It went out of it. Yeah, it got well and truly pulled out of existence by the mid 80s. So, thanks very much for the report. But just yeah, I understand Balclutha, having lived very close to it. I understand the other areas, but North Otago might need just a wee look at as you're reevaluating, just to make sure we are getting that right, especially with those health figures that are there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience, Councillor Callagher.
Great, thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. Going back to the table again, that's been raised previously. Just the relocation of the Alexandra site, and can we have confidence around those numbers that the substantial difference is leaves us with some safety in that it is comparing apples with apples?
There is a section describing the differences between these two sites in Alexandra. Essentially, just the way that the weather patterns cause the wind and everything to behave in that basin means that there are much higher concentrations at the old site compared to where the site is now. We probably, what would be nice to do is to monitor both sites concurrently, but we've sort of lost access to the old site. So in an ideal world, that's what we would do. Going forward, we definitely intend to look into it, because we can't, it's not ideal to lose a site longevity and to sort of lose being able to keep performing these long-term trends at the same site. So yeah, it is something that we are considering in future.
Right, great. I guess the basis of my question was really around which is the safer site to be, that gives us the fairer representation for Alexandra, I suppose.
Yeah, probably the previous site is better for that. It is more central and it is more surrounded by the residential areas.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I think I would agree. But I think overall, when you look at the trends, if the trends are to be believed, then we do have a what looks to me to be a steady decline. When there is increases, it tends to be mirrored in the other worst affected towns. Will we have other supporting data or other parameters that will be able to be added to some decision-making thinking that would help us around those trends downwards, and give us some context about them?
Possibly. We do have a bit of information on emissions from the emissions inventories, and so the more, I guess more data is always the right answer here. So in future, when we get future emissions inventories done, then we'll be able to compare those to these ones that have been done recently to see how much emissions are still being emitted, and then we'll be able to compare that with our data then. So I guess just more time and more data.
And I guess whether there's other parameters around the number of new compliant burners, the expansion in different areas where some towns are rapidly expanding and others are still quite staid, and the improvements that we're seeing. So maybe too, in those wetter years, we know most of our firewood suppliers tend to store their firewood and dry their firewood outside, and in a wetter winter like we've just had, if we had those sorts of or that knowledge from those suppliers around the challenges they have in delivering wet wood versus dry wood, might be useful. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much. That's good. Has anybody else got any questions here? Oh, I've got just a couple, and it's around the knowledge gaps, Sarah. There's knowledge gaps around the other chemicals, the benzopyrene, I can't pronounce them, and nitrous oxide and sulfuric oxide, I guess the SO2 is. So there's some stuff there, and I wonder what we're doing about it. And also coming up, we're coming into burn-off season, and it's something that's unquantified, and we don't have any methods for assessment. So I wonder how we're going to be looking at both of those knowledge gaps.
So for the nitrogen dioxide and sulfur dioxide, those are commonly monitored in other parts of the country, and we sort of felt that it would be good to update our knowledge as well. We did monitor them back in the late 90s, so it would just be good to just see where we're tracking on that. It's unlikely that we're going to be exceeding any limits with those, but still it would be good to be covered. For benzopyrene, so that came out of a review for ultra low emission burners that was undertaken last year and presented earlier this year. And so that is I think, it's a carcinogen, and it is associated with incomplete combustion. So it sort of will be making up the parts of PM 2.5 or PM 10. And it's been found that it exceeds limits in Christchurch. So it's kind of on everyone's radar to sort of have a look at it and just check where we are. It's quite hard to monitor though, because the limits for it are so low. So you're sort of looking at, actually, I don't even know how you monitor it, but it would be something that would probably be useful to check. And the other one, sorry, what was the other portion?
The other one was outside urban air quality, the outside burning, particularly up in my area. The key irritant for people is beautiful, calm spring days, and burn off. Covers our whole basin, and I'll get a lot of phone calls. It'll start in about 2-3 weeks, probably.
Yeah,
I'll pass it on to you.
Yeah, just do it. One of the main things I've thought for outdoor burning is to look at the complaints and to try and categorize them into what's been burnt, what type, where it is, etc. But that's a very time-consuming process, which I might need help from the data teams for. And then to sort of see whether there's any impacts of these major burn-offs that might be impacting our air sheds, and to see whether we pick up on it from any of our monitors. So it's seeing as how we're sort of venturing into using smaller, cheaper mobile monitors, that could be a way we look at it in the future. It's really difficult. You can't just sort of like jump in your car and go and monitor somewhere where someone's burning. But yeah, I don't know. It is a problem that all councils have, though. It's not just us.
Okay, so my last one is around those nice little mobile, cheaper, easier ways of picking up information and monitoring. And I'm wondering if we're going to bring some more sites that we might be seeing from complaints and anecdotal evidence are actually becoming our experience air pollution as population numbers rise.
Yeah, I think that would be probably the next logical step as we sort of gather the most information we can with our airsheds that we are worried about and do know about, then that would be just the downstream impact, is to look at these other small towns. I've had quite a few complaints from places like Outram and Kaitangata, but it is one of those things though that, like, do we need to monitor when we know what the issues are every single time? So that's also a debate that we're having on a national level, because even within airsheds, concentrations vary quite a lot. So yeah, it is something to think about.
Okay. Well, if there's no more questions, what I'd like us to do is to think about whether we need to refer any of this discussion onto another committee, because we do have some knowledge gaps and we've got some concerns around Balclutha. Is there any, Sarah Gardner maybe, as this might be a good question for you. Councillor Wilson, you might want to say something first.
I share the concern of it, but considering I thought we're not going to be doing any work, and I may have got that wrong from Gwyneth, are we better to refer this to the update for next year's work? It's a 1-year deferral.
That might be the case. CEO Sarah, can you give us a bit of advice on that?
Okay, could you ask your question again?
Yes, the question is, we've got some concerns around knowledge gaps and around Balclutha. Yes. Should we be referring this on to any committee, or should we be waiting, or anywhere where a decision can be made on doing something about those gaps and about Balclutha, or should we be waiting until next year when we start actually looking at the air plan?
No, you should refer it on now to strategy and planning, because if you want any new work done, then that will need to be factored into the budget for next year.
Great. So there's...
Get Sarah Harrison just to confirm, because I know some of that work is already underway, so it might be worthwhile confirming what's already planned and budgeted versus what might be new.
Can we perhaps have a report on that brought to a strategy and planning, or
we can do that?
Is that the best way to deal with that? People, anybody got other ideas?
Sounds good to me.
Can I just make a comment, Madam Chair?
Yeah, please go.
Yeah. Hey, so currently we're still monitoring compliance, is still operating, and education is still being rolled out as we have done in the past. So I just wondered, particularly, we talked about Balclutha or whatever, whether within our existing comms budget, are we able to, ramp that up in any way, shape or form? And is that the burn, dry, breathe easy logo that the ORC rolled out a number of years ago, whether we just need to do a bit more groundwork with that, in those communities that are perhaps, struggling to control their airshed, or their air quality. So yeah, is the existing budget of comms able to be stretched a little bit further? That's my question.
I think it's
we do a regional campaign.
Yeah, we do a region-wide campaign, and we do that leading into winter and then intermittently through winter. So those communities will have had that messaging already.
Okay, so Liz, are you able to put us together an addition to the recommendation that we note the report, that we also request State of the Nation report on this?
Request a report on areas of concern, including potential knowledge gaps, and Balclutha monitoring be brought to an upcoming strategy and planning committee meeting.
I think that does it. Thank you so much, Liz. That's great. So can I have, Councillor Wilson, are you going to move that for me? Thank you. And Councillor Noon, second. Councillor Scott, you got a question, something to say?
I just wondered whether Kevin made a compelling case to also lift Oamaru in there as well. Oamaru's not a place that we talk about a lot when it comes to air quality.
Fair point. Yeah, maybe we could do that, Liz. And Sarah?
I was just going to say, rather than try and cherry pick,
Yeah, fair enough.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it would be far better to let Sarah go away and think about, where those gaps are and the work we might need to do, and then advise you of that at a different point.
Thank you. That sounds good. We might amend that, Liz.
And
Councillor
remove-
Malcolm. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, so remove the part about Valclutha monitoring. Just say potential knowledge gaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that'll cover it, and I think you know where we're going with that, Gwyneth and Sarah. Councillor Malcolm?
Look, actually, I'm very happy with that, and look, really happy with what the info we've received from Sarah Harrison, Sarah and Gwyneth, and that there's more to it than just reading this one report, and there's obviously a lot of stuff happening, but it would be quite neat to have that down on a piece of paper, just to because just in case Councillor Noon forgets it, or some other people of that age, so. But no, I think we've had some tremendous explanations, and it'll be just quite neat to have that report at some stage. Thank you.
So we can see where we're at. We've got Councillor Wilson, Councillor Noon as the mover and seconder. Is everybody clear on the motion? Cool. All in favour, raise your hands, please. I believe that is everybody. Anybody against? No. Thank you very much. And thank you, Sarah, Gwyneth and Sarah, for really good advice and reports. And that was really good. And that's actually the end of our meeting. We are really early, and thank you for that. I thought some of these might take quite a lot longer, but we've done well. And a big vote of thanks to the staff, because honestly, that was there's some incredible information in there.
Thank you for chairing it.
Thank you.
I have a question for Councillor Malcolm.
Go right ahead.
Would you have red carded Geordie Barrett?
I would.